So Dana White went on the Fullsend podcast and alluded to a super fight that does not involve Conor McGregor. I'm going to read the quote that was posted right here. We're talking about a super fight right now that just popped up a few days ago. Every fight that you would consider a super fight would involve McGregor, but this one doesn't. And today I'm going to try and predict what possibly could be this fight. It does not involve Conor McGregor whatsoever. So I'm assuming this is a big-time fight, and this will be on UFC 300. And I'm not going to lie, I am completely clueless on what that fight really is. I have no idea. I can only assume, so these are just predictions, and some of these are just way out there. Like, I'm not even trolling. Like, I have a matchup here that literally I know 100% won't happen. Like, or 99.99999% won't happen. But I feel like this is a lot of fun. So let's go and get right into it. Let's talk about the first matchup that does make sense, and I guess it is a super fight, but to me it's not really a super fight. It's a great matchup. It's Khamzat Chimaev versus Israel Adesanya. Now, would you guys consider that a super fight? I mean, that is a pretty big fight. Khamzat Chimaev, who just beat Kamaru Usman recently at the last pay-per-view, going up against Israel Adesanya, who was just a champion in the middleweight division. That's a pretty big fight. I don't know if that's a super fight. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, listen, look, Conor McGregor, every fight with him is a super fight just because that's going to garner a lot of attention. That's going to garner and get over 1 million pay-per-view buys. But we got to talk about somebody who is not on Conor McGregor, who has not, got over 1 million pay-per-view buy, gates or whatever, or, they've gotten over 1 million pay-per-view buys for a pay-per-view. And Izzy has not done that. I believe Izzy at the most had gotten over 800,000, if I'm not mistaken. And Khamzat Chimaev, obviously early on, he's early on into his career, his UFC career. He hasn't had enough fights to warrant him to be like, he is a top star, but I mean, he hasn't even become the champion yet. Khamzat versus Izzy is a big time fight. I'm not gonna lie to you, and I can definitely see this fight being made. And I can see it be made probably for April, UFC 300. I understand that Izzy wanted some extra time off, but I don't know. Maybe they're gonna throw Izzy the bag to probably accept this fight. I don't think that this is the fight that they're talking about, though. Even though I'm just putting it out there, I don't think that this is the fight that they're talking about. I think the UFC, they'd rather do probably something else for Israel Adesanya, and I'm going to talk about the next thing that I think they will rather do. And this one makes more sense, and this to me is more of a super fight. Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 3 for the light heavyweight championship. This to me is more of a super fight than Khamzat and Israel Adesanya, because there's nothing on the line for that fight. I mean, it's just, two ranked guys in the middleweight division going up against each other. Yes, it's a big time fight with two big time names, but there's nothing at stake. There's nothing on the line. When it comes to Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira, probably the greatest, combat sport rivalry of all time, arguably, right? And you have these two guys who obviously, they have a long rivalry that spans years and years and years. And recently, Israel Adesanya knocked out the current light heavyweight champion in Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira goes up in weight and becomes the light heavyweight champion. I feel like, listen, it's written on the wall. I understand that Jamal Hill, in my opinion, deserves it next. That's why it might not be this one either. But Pereira and Jamal Hill is not a super fight. That's not a super fight whatsoever. Jamal Hill is not a big name. Pereira is a pretty big name, but not like to the point. Unless he's mentioned in the likes with Israel Adesanya. That's right. That right there is box office, and that's gonna do big numbers, in my opinion. And if you have the light heavyweight championship on the line, I think that just ups the level of anticipation for everybody for that matchup. And I can definitely see this fight being made. There is a slight possibility that this fight does get made. And Dana White just bypasses, and the UFC bypass Jamal Hill, and they say, you know what, Jamal Hill, you're going to have to wait a little bit more, and they do this fight. But I think that this fight is not going to be it either. Listen, like I said, I'm not sure about any of these fights whatsoever, to be quite honest with you. And none of these fights could be the one. It could be something completely different. You know what I mean? But the next fight is absolutely ridiculous. The one that I said next, I just want to say this is next. Yes, Islam Makhachev versus George St. Pierre. I know. It does not make any fucking sense. And this is definitely the least likely scenarios to happen. Out of all the fights that you could possibly name, I think this is the least likely. But we're talking about a super fight here. We're not talking about no fucking, some whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? We're talking about a super fight with big names. We're talking about big time guys. George St. Pierre is a big time name. He has been retired for quite some time, over 6 years since he's last fought, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I believe so. Since 2017, to come back and fight Islam Makhachev at I don't know if they can do it at a UFC 300. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure because I don't know what's going on with Islam Makhachev during this time. I believe he has I don't know if that's the time when Ramadan happens. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if he celebrates that anyway. Listen, I believe, I don't know if the schedules could work out, due to whatever's going on with Islam Makhachev. And listen, George St. Pierre more than likely is not going to probably ever come back and fight in the UFC. This fight is probably not going to be the one. Let's just be honest. It won't be George St. Pierre versus Islam Makhachev. If it is, that's absolutely insane. That's crazy. I'm not going to lie. I think Islam wins just because George St. Pierre is not active. Does he train? Yes. But he's 42 years old. And at that point, you're just adding to the legacy of Islam Makhachev at that point, really. If you're giving him George St. Pierre to fight, that's insane. That's absolutely crazy. Like I said, this is just a shot in the dark at this point. That fight right there, I'm pretty certain that won't happen. But listen, Dana White says super fight that does not involve Conor McGregor. What is the one of the biggest fights that you can possibly make? I think that fight right there. Listen, because even though it was GSP versus Khabib, that was always speculated and always, a possible dream matchup. That never happened. I don't think that GSP is going to want to fight Islam. I think he always wanted to fight Khabib, right? If he was to fight ever, it was going to be against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And it was going to be on 155 for the lightweight title. That was the fight. I don't think that he's going to fight Islam Makhachev. There's just no way. But listen, like I said, big fights. The next fight that I have, this fight's not a super fight by any stretch of the means, is I believe Michael Venom Page versus Kevin Holland. It has been rumored that this fight could happen. Kevin Holland said that he hasn't been offered that fight, but on the big board, it was leaked that there was a fight between Michael Venom Page and Kevin Holland that was on a fight card. I don't know which fight card it was, but both of those guys' names were on there. And, that's a big fight, don't get me wrong, because Michael Venom Page, if y'all don't know who he is, if y'all don't know who he is, then that's not a super fight. But he was a Bellator fighter. He was fighting all around the world. I believe he was in bare knuckle as well. And he has a lot of viral moments of, him getting crazy-ass knockouts, him being super just, cocky and just insane. If you haven't seen Michael Venom Page highlights, I suggest you go watch him. They're absolutely insane. I wouldn't say that he's a good fighter, but he's not a great fighter. He's not. I think he'll lose to the majority of the guys in the UFC. But Kevin Holland, that's a pretty interesting matchup between both of those guys. Two very entertaining and exciting stand-up guys that fight will be absolutely fucking batshit crazy. Michael Venom Page in the UFC is what I wanted for years, but I don't think he never really is on the level of the other guys. There always been rumors, and now there's been rumors more than ever of him being in the UFC. And he's been in talks, and they rumored that fight. That was a fight rumor that happened. But then Kevin Holland went, I believe, on social media, and he said that fight's not going to happen. He didn't say that the fight was not going to happen, that he hasn't been offered that fight. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going on with that. But Michael Venom Page, that's a pretty interesting fight, but that's not a super fight. And the next one, I don't know if you want to constitute this as a super fight as well, but it's any fight that has to do with Nick Diaz. I don't know. That's the only other fight that I can possibly think of, a Nick Diaz return or Nate Diaz return, possibly. Whenever Nate Diaz is done with his little venture outside, but I don't know if he wants to be back in the UFC. So I think Nick Diaz makes more sense. I think that the UFC still want to do something with him, maybe with Jim Miller or one of the other all-time greats. You know, like a fight like that, I think to me makes a lot more sense. But who knows? I have no idea. That to me, that doesn't garner a super fight. GSP. A lot of people said GSP versus Nick Diaz. I mean, I think GSP easily wins that though. I mean, that's not an intriguing fight. I think GSP easily beats Nick Diaz. I could be completely wrong, but I don't know. I just think that that's an easy fight for GSP. And listen, that's a big fight. Don't get me wrong. That would be fucking insane if that gets announced. I'm like, holy shit, you know. But I think to me, what's more crazier is Islam Makhachev versus George St. Pierre. That to me is a lot more, makes a lot more sense. But, I mean, not a lot more sense, but I think that's a bigger fight in my opinion. But those are the fights. I have, like I said, I have no clue. That what is going to be announced. That, listen, Conor McGregor is the biggest name in the sport, and he's always a super fight. To have it constitute some other fight as a super fight that's not named Jones versus Ngannou. I did not name Jones versus Ngannou because I don't think that's going to happen. But, I mean, listen. Maybe it does. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Who knows? Maybe they're working with PFL, you know, behind closed doors. But who knows? But that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon in another video. Peace out.